So we're spending some time this week talking about grading, which is a hot topic, and I can even remember my second year teaching back in the late 1990s when our principal talked about why do we give grades and what's in a grade, and we were beginning to think about that conversation almost 3 decades ago. And still in this country, we are rehashing and continuing to rehash what grading is and should be. So, as you do your reading this week and as you do your reflection assignment, and I have put in the reflection assignment, you can pick a passage from the reading. Also, you can weave in anything from this presentation as well. And about grading that resonates with you. So we're going to look at probably topics that are not new to you, but hopefully will spark some new ideas and some new thinking, especially as you're dealing with your colleagues and teachers in your buildings. But we're going to look at what a grade means and what are our values when it comes to grading. And are our current grading practices actually detrimental to this? So I love the change cycle. Like, I absolutely love this, and it's old, but it's so true. And anytime we talk about something that is going to move somebody's cheese or change their paradigm or have them rethink something, everybody jumps into some level of this change cycle. So people who are resistant to change or people who have already a very firm belief that what they're doing is fine often start in stage one. They feel afraid, cautious, paralyzed, and kind of like shocked. And then over time, they may move from those feelings to being angry and resentful and skeptical and resistant. And if they have strong enough personality, they can pull people into that level two, that stage two. That's kind of a dangerous level. And then stage three is I've accepted that I'm going to have to do whatever it is, but I feel anxious and confused. I'm not sure how to move forward. And then there's this kind of tipping point where if we can get to out of stage three and into stage four, where we feel like, okay, I'm beginning to feel like this is something that resonates with me in a way that I can be successful. We can get to that anticipation and creativity and that stage of having that renewed energy around whatever that change is. And then, of course, 5 and 6, I mean, that's where we want to be. That's where we're jamming. That's where our early adopters started. That's where, anytime you have a change, that's where you want to get. And the thing about this change cycle is it doesn't just pertain to when somebody changes something in your world. If you change jobs and you even choose to change that job, you're going to be in some of these lower stages of change. When you when you have a death in the family, when your child changes schools. I mean, this is a part of life, but I think it's really important, and I've used this so many times with administrators and with teachers. I've used like Pear Deck or something, and have had them actually put their dot or, put your name, if they want to be anonymously use dot, where you are right now in terms of X change, whatever it is that we were changing as a district or as a school. And so that helps me too to do that over time, to see how how folks change, how they move along that change cycle over time with an implementation. All right, so let's get back to grading. The thing is about grades, the truth about letter grades are all of these things that sometimes they're subjective, or all the time they're subjective, many times they're misleading. Sometimes they don't really have any value. They probably don't mean what we think they mean. There have been efforts, as I said, to innovate grading. Teachers don't give letter grades that supposedly they are earned. Failure is a neutral part of life, except when it comes to part of your permanent academic records. I think that's huge as we're talking about this era of failing forward and growth mindset. Yet we haven't really adopted that sometimes when it comes to grades. We say C is average, and by definition, most kids are average. However, when you look at grades in schools, in some of my schools that I worked with, I found that grades were very heavily leaned toward the top. There were far more A's and B's than anything in the school. And then that sometimes did not correlate or correspond to standardized test scores or to true learning of standards. Sometimes with parents pressuring kids to keep grades up may not be the best message we could send. And I think this one, I've saved it to last because it's really significant to me. This is something that as a professional has been part of my philosophy since I was a young teacher, is sometimes our grades are more about compliance than they are about content mastery. And I want to let that sink in. How many of you guys actually got extra credit points from bringing in a pack of paper, or for bringing markers into the classroom, or you got extra credit for anything, but buying your own copy of a book? I remember buying my own copy of The Scarlet Letter and getting like 5 points on my test because I bought my own copy and didn't have to use the library's copy. So very subjective and very compliance-based. So when we think about grading, our remaining in this normal state and refusing to change is ultimately to choose a slow death. And I want you to think about that in terms of current grading practices. So we talked a lot about assessment for learning. So in continuing with that vein, we're going to talk a little about grading for learning and responding to students' needs rather than asking them to respond to our needs. We've also talked about in this course how teachers are under so much pressure with standardized assessments and pacing guides, and we really try to get kids to fit into our pacing guide and our box and our deadlines, when oftentimes if we just stop and kind of really think philosophically about why we all went into this, it might really help us rethink our grading practices. So many traditional grading practices are inequitable and they actually hinder learning. So here are some things that have become big ticket talking items over the years. So I'm sure you probably have read the case against the zero, the case against homework. There's so many articles out there that are trying to debunk the myth that a zero is really good, all homework is fine, those sorts of things. There have been probably just as many arguments about zeros in education than there are in the Congress right now, in the House of Representatives. I think what's important about this zero thing, if you've got a student who doesn't turn in any work on multiple assignments, we have no evidence to know where that kid is. No evidence. So to give them a zero and then to average that zero in later on when a student turns in something that's, let's say, a 92, is that kid's learning really around the 40-something mark, the 40% of being accurate mark? So really thinking about what we give grades on and how we use those grades. That also lends in the fact of averaging grades, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but there's a real danger in averaging grades. If we're truly believers in growth mindset and in failing forward and that growth model, are we really grading kids on the first time that we assess them on something, or where they end up at the end of the semester? And I'm going to give you guys an example of that in a minute. So grading non-academic tasks and behaviors, giving students a grade for bringing in their parent permission form signed, giving kids a grade for some learning contract of signing it, taking away points for arbitrary academic behaviors. I'm going to take away 5 points if you don't put your name on the paper. But that, if a grade is truly meant to tell us what a student knows, understands, and is able to do in terms of the content standards, that grade means nothing when we start subtracting 5 points for being late or 10 points for being late. So it's really important to think about, what are we truly trying to assess here? Another really popular way that a thing that affects our grading in K-12 is extra credit points. And we'll give you extra credit because you didn't do well in this, and you're used to making an A or used to making a B, and you made below that. So extra credit to tip the scales, when sometimes that extra credit has nothing to do with the mastery of the content standards. Now, if the extra credit is in fact aligned to ensuring that the students understand the content standards, like if they do test corrections and have a way to show, okay, yes, I missed this, but now I understand that. That's one thing, but giving extra credit for bringing in food for the canned food drive is really, it takes away any essence of what the grade means. And I do think we do have a problem in education, not with all teachers. And you'll know them when you walk in their classroom, where they use the grade to have power over a kid because they can. And it's a power trip. And fortunately, these teachers are not the norm, but they are out there. So there's a group called leadinclusion.org, and they really focus on how we should ensure that all kids are treated equitably. And one of the quotes that they have is about students' grades. Really, truly, a grade should represent the where I am now, not an average over time, which is a great, why standards-based grading is fantastic. And if you do have standards-based grading and you build proficiency skills so that I know that a 3 is this thing and a 2 is this thing, then I am at a 2 right now. So this, I think that what's really important right now is that in terms of this quote is, a grade should demonstrate what a kid knows, understands, and is able to do, especially in terms of the content standards, in a way that parents and students could be able to understand that. And I know that there's this whole thing, and I mean, it does sound sound like it's in conflict with the South Carolina profile of a graduate. We talk about how we want to instill, these skills of responsibility and doing the right thing and into our kids. And when they don't turn in their work, we're holding them responsible. We're grading them on their ability to follow directions. They're going to have to follow directions in a real job. Yes, they are going to have to follow a direction in a real job. But if I teach high school English, which is what I taught, that child's grade should actually be on, has he or she met the standards and mastered the standards for that course, not on whether he or she was responsible. I do understand that if a kid doesn't ever turn in any work, he or she can't demonstrate what they know. And so then I can't know. So it's kind of a null. It's got to be a null. But zeros, especially when we start averaging them, we can actually kill a child's score, and a child's grade at the end of a semester or the end of a school year could actually be in no way representative to what they actually know. So we've talked about this. A grade shouldn't be the reward. It shouldn't be a bartering tool. It should really be used to make instructional decisions, to document their progress. It's not bringing in Kleenexes or doing the extra things or extra credit, but it really, truly should be exactly what it says it is. It is a means to inform a student and parent where a kid is, and to inform the state where the kid is, and to actually be able to inform your instruction as an educator. So we often give kids feedback like, do more, work harder, spend more time on this, turn in your homework. But I want to tell you the story of Ryan. Ryan was a student that I had probably early to mid 2000s in Hickory High School, which is in Hickory, North Carolina. It's a suburban high school with a very interesting student body. Parents, lawyers and doctors that live on the lake, and then a very poverty-stricken, lower class, poor community on the other side of the railroad tracks. And honestly, the railroad tracks divided this city. And so in my classes, I would have these uber wealthy kids who would jump on their parents' plane and go to New York for the weekend for their birthday with all their girlfriends. And then I also have kids that didn't know where their next meal was coming from. So I had this student, And you guys have all had them. So I'm going to tell you a story that probably you have similar stories, but Ryan was a very quiet young man that sat in the back of my English 1 honors class. And Ryan never turned in one piece of paper. However, Ryan read everything we assigned, and when we would have these deep classroom discussions, Ryan would bring up these absolutely astoundingly beautiful points. He would bring up these poignant statements that demonstrated a deep analysis of text, and he could very easily take his thoughts and compare and contrast them to other things he had read or to situations in the real world, and there was a real depth of his understanding. So without his turning in any work, I knew Ryan had pretty much mastered the reading literature and reading informational text, as well as speaking and listening standards, which are in the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. What I didn't get a good sense of with Ryan was the writing standards. So if I looked in the grade book, Ryan probably had about a 30 grade because he didn't ever turn any work in. However, when Ryan took the end of course exam for English 1, which is a state mandated exam at the time, he made a 97th percentile. That is extremely high. And I know, 97, yeah, Heather, that's high. No, but that was rare to have too many kids score that high. So I'm in this conundrum because even if I average Ryan's 97 in, which was 20% of his grade, by law, 20% had to be the end of course exam. And then I averaged in 80%, which was like his 32. That kid's still going to fail the class. So, that's the conundrum of the teacher. What does that grade truly mean? Now, I still don't have any indication of what Ryan understood about those writing standards. So, I'll tell you later what I decided to do with Ryan. But I think I honored him and honored what he knew. But we'll come back to Ryan at the end. So, what is in that grade? That grade should be evidence towards standards mastery. It should be based on proficiency scales and understanding where a student is, where he's going, and where we want him to be in a way that parents, students, and the teacher can understand. I get that not all districts and schools have moved to standards-based grading. However, even if you don't have a standards-based grading model in your school, a teacher being able to look at this standard and create assignments to show that a kid has mastered standards, which is what we've done this whole semester, is really imperative in really truly understanding how we grade. So our best practices are the things that we've already said and we just talked about. I think level 3, I could spend a whole course on rubrics and proficiency scales, but if we did that, we would go down a deep, dark rabbit hole, and everybody talks about rubrics all the time and what makes a rubric really good. And there's tons of research out there on rubrics and great resources for you, but really helping kids understand how they need to progress and what they need to do. And I think number 4, because of the time we're allotted in education and because of the robust nature of so many of our standards, we often fail to give kids the opportunities for scaffolding and feedback that they need. I think one of the things that we can always do to support student learning in terms of grading is giving kids an opportunity to go back and have reciprocal teaching where we're kind of, even when we're moving forward, we're pulling in some of those concepts that we've already taught that we know kids had some issues with and giving them multiple chances to show mastery on those. So who changes the world? I found this fascinating, and I Google this every so often to see if things have changed, but there are tons of articles out there. Just go Google this. When we look at who really changes the world, it is not people at the top of the class. Valedictorians and salutatorians and people that are at that highest level are not the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs of the world. They're not the people that come up with these innovative ways that they change the way we live. They are generally mediocre students in the classroom. They have GPAs that average at 2.9. When we think of like the Einsteins of the world, the Mozarts of the world, they were not good students. And many of them had learning disabilities or learning differences. So when we think about who's actually out there making significant change, it is generally not the people that how we reward them with these quote unquote grades. So I think that's just stereotypical. So when we think about changing grading, it really freaks people out. And they fall really into these stages. And I remember very distinctly a couple years ago doing an activity where we read an article on grading practices and with all of our principals. And I had two high school principals. I really honestly thought they were both going to have a heart attack. They couldn't even fathom how we could change the way we grade and our philosophical means of grading in high school, and we're getting kids ready for college. And I kept saying, but are we? But it was really a very long journey with those two. They really actually started in 1 and 2 altogether with that resentment and being skeptical and resistant, but they were also just actually paralyzed by fear. So we have to think about, are we following our GPS? And I'm going to get back to Ryan at this point. So after the grades came back, I sat down with Ryan and said, Ryan, here's where we are. It's evident that you understand these things, right? You do not want to go to summer school. I don't think you need to be in summer school, but I've got to know that you can write. Do you think you could take this assignment and complete this one assignment for me to demonstrate to me that you have command of the writing standards? And he agreed to do that. And once he did, I felt like I was able to give that child a grade that was fair to him, that truly demonstrated his knowledge and understanding. He didn't get there the way all kids do. But I had to really come to terms with what is fair and what is equitable versus what is equal. And for this child, with his life circumstances and the situation that he was in, there was a lot going on, it was evident that this child was brilliant. But he wasn't able to function and do what I needed him to do. But I needed to honor the standards as well. So I felt like what we came to with Ryan was a good outcome. So am I following my GPS? And our GPS is our grading philosophy statement. And I think this is something that you could think about. There's several good articles out there on grading. I will put some grading articles in the resources for this module. But sitting down with teachers as you are a teacher leader and think about analyzing current grading practices and what your values or what your teacher's values are in respect to grading. And then have them share their belief or their philosophy. And then talking about some of these things that you've learned in the Vattergott book, which is actually, if you're rethinking grading for your whole school, it's a very short book. It's a good one to purchase. It's in the syllabus. And then their rationale about those beliefs. And then giving them an opportunity to reflect on, as they went through this process and you did some learning together, practices that folks shared about grading, what they really want grading to be, and then things they want to keep in their current grading practices, things they want to drop, or things they want to modify. So I will get you a copy of this GPS, hopefully in Word form so you can modify it. We know that nothing's so painful as a sudden and great change. To me, I kind of laugh at this quote because we've been trying to revise grading since the 90s, and it is 2023, and we are still trying to revise grading. So I don't know what it's going to take for us to take this Titanic of a concept and turn it kind of nationwide to really rethink what's in a grade. And that'll do it for this module. At this point, you've got a reflection to complete, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.